Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. Now, as you can imagine, this has been another actually pretty productive week for the market, as we saw the first full week of the new Standard, as well as the first full week of the new Modern. Modern's been affected as well by Aether Revolt, not only because of some of the new cards, but because of some of the bannings that occurred prior to the set coming out. So you see some interesting changes to both the Standard meta and the Modern meta, and we're going to look at how those changes have impacted the market and what cards are hot right now, as we always do. And we're also going to look at Legacy. There's some interesting things going on in the vintage market when it comes to Unlimited, so we'll take a deeper dive into that. A couple quick things before we get started. Just like last week, I'm not going to talk specifically about Aether Revolt values this week. Right now, they are still very volatile. I did a video last Monday where we did talk about some of the hottest cards, what they're valued at. I'm going to do a follow-up video at the beginning of this week once we get past this weekend. So if you're interested in Aether Revolt values, check those videos out. Today, we're going to focus more on the cards that have already existed prior to Aether Revolt and how they're being affected. Secondly, if you check out the description below, you'll see some links to our Amazon affiliate store. Any purchases you make through any links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. It's always appreciated. You'll find the singles that we talk about in today's Market Watch and previous Market Watches, as well as Aether Revolt sealed product, whole bunch of stuff on there. Also, you'll find links to our Patreon page, which is another way to help support us and keep us doing what we're doing. So having said that, let's get into the Market Watch. We'll begin, as always, with Standard. And we're going to look at the cards that lost value this week. Now, this is an interesting list. Actually, all 5 cards on here are Planeswalkers, which is highly unusual. Also, all 5 cards on here actually are seeing Standard play, so you may ask yourself, well, why are they going down in value? Basically, prior to the new Standard, there was a lot of speculation over which cards were going to have the biggest impact, so naturally, Planeswalkers started to climb a little bit, and now they're just, for the most part, starting to stabilize. You're not going to see big losses here for the most part, but you will see some normal stabilization. Coming in number 5 is Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, down 56 cents to 13.08. This is a perfect example of a card that spiked really hard over the last couple of weeks because folks were thinking about Selesnya tokens being a thing. And we got through the first weekend, and yes, Selesnya tokens were a thing. They came in 4th in the Star City Games Open, did pretty well. They didn't take up maybe as big of a percentage of the field as some of the other decks, but it still performed really well, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be tweaked and still be part of the meta, at least for the foreseeable future. Coming in number 4 is Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, down 58 cents to 25.89. Now, Gideon's been slipping steadily since Blue-White Flash had Reflector Mage banned, right? But it's still seeing play. Gideon's still out there. It's going to continue to be out there. It's just stabilizing and finding its normal market value right now. Coming in number 3 is Liliana, The Last Hope, down 79 cents to 38.99. Now, out of all the cards on the list today, Liliana, probably the best long-term investment, considering she came out of Eldritch Moon. A couple of things about that set. It was a small set. It was in the middle of that blitz of sets we got last summer, where it just seemed like we're moving from one thing to another. And because of that, less packs of this were open than many of the other sets. The other big indicator here is the fact that Eldritch Moon did not include Masterpieces. Masterpieces were a driving force for a lot of packs being open in many of the other sets. Liliana didn't have that, so she's a little bit harder to find. Is she still seeing Standard play? Of course she is, and she will continue to. She's down a little bit this week, but this is a card to watch long term. Coming in number 2 is Chandra, Torch of Defiance, down $1.59 to $21.57. This one's interesting because Chandra came down quite a bit this week, but actually looked really good on camera last weekend. I like her as part of the Jeskai control combo deck to either maybe be a 1 or 2 of in the deck or come in out of the sideboard to deal with certain matchups, especially control decks. That deck looked like it got wrecked by control decks in game 1, but then a lot of times you could bring in a burn package, including Chandra, and change the style of your deck a little bit. You still have the combo, but really you also have the ability to win through burn or other ways. So Chandra looked really good in those type of situations. So I'm a little surprised she dipped a little bit this week, but again, she's also seeing modern play too in a lot of the Jund decks. So this is another one to watch long term. Coming in at number 1 is Saheeli Rai. She's down $2.12 to $21.99. Now, she spiked really hard due to the Felidar Guardian combo going into the new Standard. There was a lot of hype, a lot of expectations around this card, and did they pay off? Yes, they did. She did amazing last weekend. There were a couple different types of combo decks that featured her. There was a Jeskai version, which was probably the more popular. There's also a 4-color version, which tried to incorporate green a little bit to smooth out the draws. So they were both good. They both actually did really, really well in the tournament. This is a combo that's definitely here to stay. And what was nice about it, it didn't look like it was overpowering. Like, it didn't look like it was something that perhaps needed to be banned necessarily, at least not out of week one. But it held its own and did really well in the meta. And it made it a very diverse meta in general, I think. So it was a very good card. It performed really well, but you have to take into account that it spiked really hard prior to that. All right, before we move on to the cards that went up in value, I know they're not legal anymore in Standard, but we have to check in with our old friends Smuggler's Copter and Emrakul. Smuggler's Copter down 84 cents to 506 this week as it continues to drop off the banning. And similar story here with Emrakul, the Promised End, down $1.73 to $13.58. All right, so let's talk about what's hot right now in Standard. And of course, as you can imagine, this is a reflection of what we saw last weekend. Coming in number 5 is Sunken Hollow, up 62 cents to $3.89. One of the big decks to show up in the meta has been a control deck that's Dimir colors. So as you can imagine, Sunken Hollow gets a little bit of a bump this week. Coming in number 4 is Authority of the Consuls, up 77 cents to $3.53. This is a key card in those Jeskai combo decks with Saheeli and Felidar Guardian. Coming in number 3, Tireless Tracker, up $1.22 to $7.33. Now, this one's interesting. It saw play in the old Standard. It's already seen play in the new Standard. However, there's a lot of speculation around this card and how it's going to combo with Mechanized Production. There's folks really working to kind of make this a thing in the meta, and it could get there. This is one of those decks that I don't think you see week 1, at least not very strongly, but maybe picks up steam in weeks 2, weeks 3, weeks 4, and so on. So this is one to watch, especially as we approach the Pro Tour. If this can pan out, Tireless Tracker will continue to go up, no doubt. If it doesn't quite break through as a top tier deck in the meta, then you'll probably see the tracker start to go down a little bit. Coming in at number 2 is Blooming Marsh, up $2.17 to $6.55. So when you look at the Star City Games Open, the top 3 decks in the tournament were all Golgari decks. Now, they were different types. The winning deck was a Delirium deck. The other 2 were aggro decks. So they were a little different, but guess what? They shared these colors. And because of that, Blooming Marsh definitely getting a nice bump this week. Coming in at number 1, Virtuous Gearhulk, up $7.66 to $17.95. So coming out of Kaladesh's release, this was maybe one of the more hyped cards. This card, as well as Torrential Gearhulk, did very well initially. Torrential kept taking off, especially as the blue-white flash deck was a thing in Standard. Virtuous started to trail off a little bit, but guess what? Last week it had a huge showing, and the main reason is it happens to combo really well with a little card called Walking Ballista, which really was one of the featured cards of the first week of the new Standard. So these cards working together, as you can imagine, Virtuous Gearhulk saw a nice bump this week. All right, let's move on to Modern. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, you're going to see some influence here from some Aether Revolt cards. You're also going to see some influence from the bannings. The fact that, especially with Gitaxian Pro being out of the format's slowing down a little bit, which means there's other cards that maybe weren't fast enough before that are now fast enough to be part of Modern. We're going to see that definitely in the cards that are increasing in value. As far as the cards that lost value, what we're going to see here, a lot of these are cards that potentially could be reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. A lot of folks are starting to kind of hold onto their wallets for a minute until we find out what is going to be in that set. So let's take a look. Coming in number 5, Crucible of Worlds from Fifth Dawn. It's down $1.62 to $56.58. Now, this is an interesting one. Could this be in Modern Masters 2017? Sure, it could. A few months ago, I would have said probably not, because it feels more of an Eternal card to me. Maybe a future Eternal Masters. It's a great Commander card. It's good in some Eternal formats. But what's awkward about this card is it's not a great Modern card. It's a fan favorite card. It's a very valuable card, but does it really belong in Modern Masters? I don't know. Having said that, one thing we've seen recently is Wizards is really trying to give the fans a lot of good reprints. So they might just shoehorn this into Modern Masters regardless. So it's hard to call right now, but the card is a little bit soft right now with the impending Modern Masters release. Coming in number 4 is Leyline of the Void. This is the Magic 2011 version, down $1.90 to $16.07. So this has been a key part of many, many sideboards in Modern. It's going to continue to be, but the reason it's down a little bit right now is because of the hit Dredge took with the banning of Golgari Grave Troll. So is Dredge gone? No, Dredge isn't gone. But it has opened up at least the possibility for people to start thinking about some other sideboard options. So this card's gone down a little bit. Coming in number 3, Liliana of the Veil, down $1.90 to $95.74. Liliana has been slowly slipping over the last few months, and you can probably guess why. Modern Masters 2017, I mean, there's no doubt this is going to be the marquee card of the set, right? I mean, this is going to replace Tarmogoyf, I think, in this release anyway, as the biggest card that everyone really wants to get their hands on. It will be a mythic rare. It's going to be in a product that isn't widely distributed, although Modern Masters 2015 was pretty fairly distributed, as well as Eternal Masters. So if this trend continues, there's going to be a lot of Lilianas introduced into the market. Of course, not as many as if it was in a standard release, as you can imagine, but still, I think it will be enough to satisfy a lot of the demand out there. So you can imagine the card value will continue to drop. Now, once they go ahead and officially announce it, you're going to see a nice little drop from this card. And as packs get opened of Modern Masters 2017, again, you're going to see a price drop here. I would be shocked if it's not included in the set. I can't imagine that Wizards could even do that. The fans would be outraged at that point. So, yes, I have no doubt it's going to be there. This card will continue to go down because of that. So if you're waiting to pick up Liliana, I'd wait a little longer, even though she is starting to come down. Coming in number 2 is Noble Hierarch for Modern Masters 2015, down $2.88 to $59.99. Now, much like Liliana, there's a really good chance that this card's going to show up, but it's not a shoo-in. It's not like Liliana where I would bet for sure this card will definitely be there, but I really hope it is. It really should be. This was not in the first Modern Masters, but did show up in 2015. It's a key card, not only in Modern, but in Legacy and just so many formats, and desperately needs a reprint. Right now it's soft. People are holding off with the expectation that it will show up in the set. Coming in number 1 is Sword of the Meek, down $3.27 to $11.39. And yes, again, this could be in Modern Masters 2017. It's very possible. If it is reprinted, it could even be reprinted as an uncommon potentially, although there's a good chance it could get the bump up to rare at the very least. And the other piece of this is the Sword of the Meek combo decks probably are a little bit less of the field right now, considering some of the other decks that are emerging than they were maybe a month or two ago. They're still out there. As a matter of fact, I played against one on Magic Online last night, so I know they're still there. But yeah, I think there's some other options right now, and we're going to look at those in just a second. All right, let's look at the top 5 Modern cards that have gained value this week. Coming in number 5 is Retract, up $1.80 to $9.50. We talked about this one at length last week, but this is part of the Pure Steel Paladin deck, and that deck is really starting to gain some momentum for sure, especially considering SRAM Senior Edificer really was a missing piece that deck was really waiting for a while, I think. It's a deck that's been hanging out there on the fringe and is now breaking through as maybe one of the stronger decks in the new meta, so this is definitely one to watch going forward. Coming in number 4 is Esper Charm, up $2.41 to $4.37. Now, last week we talked about Narset spiking a little bit due to the fact that the meta is changing and slowing down in Modern without Gitaxian Probe. So that means a lot of the mid-range decks have a chance of flourishing. We saw some cards benefit from that previously the last 2 weeks, and those include cards from, for example, Narset, like I mentioned, but also even some of the Tron cards, which are good foils to mid-range decks, have been going up in value. Well, same story here. Esper Charm's going up because, again, that mid-range style Esper control deck is becoming a lot more powerful in the new meta. Coming in number 3 is Safi, Eric's Daughter, and this is up $3.28 to $10.97. Now, this is one you really want to keep an eye on. If you don't have your playsets of this card, you may want to think of picking some up. Here's the deal with this one in particular. It started off as a commander card. I mean, it's been a fairly popular commander over the years from time to time. And it's a Time Spiral card. Never saw a reprint. It's probably not going to see a reprint in Modern Masters 2017 because it's really just catching on now for Modern, which means it could be a couple more years before you see this card reprinted in some capacity. And that's very intriguing to me. Now, last week we talked about how this card could definitely be a thing in Modern, considering the way it plays well with Renegade Rallier. And you know what? Guess what? That happened last weekend. Decks running these cards did really well. Basically, it's a Collected Company deck, but they had a very strong performance last weekend. Not only does it combo well with Renegade Rallier, but it uses cards like Viscera Seer, for example. Another example would be Anaphrenic Tree Spirit. It's a very interesting deck, and I think it has some legs definitely in the Modern format. So this is a card that you really want to keep a close eye on. Coming in at number 2 is Mox Opal, and the Modern Masters 2015 version went up $4.13 this week to $46.45, where the Scars of Meriden went up $4.33 to $47.20. So mainly the reason that this one's going up this particular week is, again, it's another part of the Pure Steel Paladin deck, actually one of the more expensive parts of that deck. And of course, Mox Opal already sees playing a lot of other places, including Affinity, so it's already got a nice price tag attached to it. And even though it potentially could show up in Modern Masters 2017, because a lot of folks are trying to put that deck together, it's still pretty hot right now. And coming in at number 1 is Ruined Halo, up $5.73 to $14.99. All right, this is an interesting one. It's a fine sideboard card. I mean, you do see this in sideboards occasionally in Modern, but the question is, why now? Why is this coming into play at this point? The main reason is a lot of folks started to notice a shortage in this card. And I don't want to say a buyout because it doesn't feel like a buyout to me. It just feels like at some point some people were looking at TCG and realized, wow, there's not a lot of copies of this around. And it's a decent card. And started talking about it on the message board, so on and so forth. And it kind of just snowballed a little bit this week, which led to a spike as people all of a sudden started to scramble, try to pick up copies of it. Here's the deal, though. Shadowmoor rares, keep an eye on basically any decent Shadowmoor rare. That particular set, as well as even Lorwyn, Morningtide, Eventide, that whole block was a time when Magic was down a little bit, and because of that, there weren't as many purchases, thus not as many cards printed. And you'll find that a lot of the cards from those sets, especially foils, I think are really going to be cards to watch over the next few months and years. If you are looking to invest in something that's not maybe vintage Magic, but something more mid-range, look at that block. And yes, sure, you got your Cryptic Commands and Vindelen Clicks and stuff like that are already expensive, but there's some opportunities like this card, for example. Just a week ago, you could pick this up for less than $10, and it's already up to $15. And granted, this is a spike. It'll probably come down a little bit as more get introduced into the market once the value goes up. But at the same time, don't miss out on these type of opportunities because they are definitely out there. So this is an interesting card to look at this week and kind of feature just because of its inclusion in that time period of Magic. All right, let's talk about Legacy. Now, Legacy is interesting this week. There's a lot of attention on the Unlimited set, and we'll talk about that in just a moment once we get to the cards going up in value. Let's look at what lost value first. Coming in number 5 is Unlimited Tropical Island, down $25.07 to $329.99. Coming in number 4, The Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, down $28.01 to $1,189.98. Number 3 is Jazem Jin, down $33.48 to $460.07. This spiked over the last couple weeks, but this is just normal stabilization. This card kind of sits between $450 and $500. Coming in number 2 is Moat, down $35.76 to $541.49. Now, this was a victim of a buyout a number of months ago. This card went up to about $650. It's nice to see it coming back down to where it was prior to the buyout. Now, a couple of reasons for this. The hype of the buyout is kind of subsiding, so this card's being forgotten about again. More copies are being introduced as the folks that bought it out, I'm sure, are turning around and selling it. But one word of caution, whenever you see a drop like this, it's going to draw some attention to the card. It may force some folks this week to pick up a copy and get it a little cheaper, and you might see a rebound next week. Coming in at number 1, Island of Wak Wak from Arabian Nights, down $40.52 to $67.48. Another card that was a victim of a buyout. I mean, it spiked real hard a couple months ago, coming back down again, but much like the previous card, it could rebound next week just because of the massive loss it had this week. All right, let's look at cards that gain value. So I mentioned this a few moments ago, but what you're going to see here is a big focus on unlimited cards, especially cards that are just your random unlimited rares. They don't even necessarily have to be reserve list cards in some cases. I don't think these are necessarily buyouts or anything like that, but I think a lot of collectors that are interested in vintage Magic have moved on to unlimited because alpha and beta have kind of become outpriced for a lot of people. Now, a lot of the spikes that we see here are happening and have been happening in alpha and beta too, but we really don't focus on those because the price points for those sets are just so dramatic and they are so rare that we don't really talk about them in the market watch. That might be something I might do a special edition of in the future. But now you're starting to see that happen in unlimited, which is really interesting. Coming in number 5 is Wrath of God, up $6.33 to $39.99, of course, from Unlimited. Again, you're going to notice the trend here. A lot of these cards are cards that have been reprinted many times. You can get more recent copies of these cards for sometimes under $1, but folks are interested in these original versions, the Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited, and sometimes even revised versions of these cards are getting a little bit more attention than they have in the past. This one in particular, though, with that Quinton Hoover art, is definitely a fan favorite. Coming in at number 4, another Unlimited rare with Mahamoti Djinn, up $7.32 to $18.42. Pretty nice percentage increase on this card. Again, can you pick up one of these from Magic Origins for probably 25 cents? Sure you could, but it's all about folks looking at some of these vintage sets. Again, another card that is not on the reserve list. Coming in at number 3 is a revised card for a change. It's Underground Sea, up $9.08 to $342.34. This is the second week in a row this has been on the list, so don't overlook that. It really is starting to show perhaps a trend that folks are getting priced out of the Unlimited dual lands. It's already happened with Alpha and Beta, and a lot of them are going to start turning their attention now to the revised. Coming in at number 2 is Howling Mine from Unlimited, up $20.87 to $95. Again, you can pick up a Howling Mine for just cents if you want to get a newer one. But this card has had a lot of attention on it recently, and it has spiked to almost $100, which seems insane for a card that's not on the reserve list. And I do have to question the longevity of some of these spikes, considering the cards that are not on the reserve list are kind of easy to find playable copies of, but there's definitely a contingency out there of people that want to collect these Unlimited and Alpha Beta cards. And coming in at number 1, another Unlimited card, Gauntlet of Might. This one at least is on the reserve list, up $22.77 to $200. And I think this one will continue to be hot over time. Just again, it is a reserve list card if nothing else. Having said that, that's the market watch for this week. So tune in at the beginning of next week where we're going to be looking at the Aether Revolt cards and doing a little bit of a deeper dive in those values. I anticipate to put that out on Monday as long as there's not any other news or something that happens on Monday that I have to report on. But I'll get it out definitely at the beginning of the week once we get through the second weekend of tournaments. So having said that, as always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.